Sam, you mentioned some tools. One of the things that I've seen you post several times now are these buy downs, right? So can you talk to us just what is this product for someone who's never heard of it? Give us the high level, and then Mark and I will dive in with some questions.
Okay, so there's a couple different types of buy downs. So I think it's important to differentiate that up front. You have a temporary buy down and a permanent buy down. Okay, and I'll start with the latter because it's shorter. A permanent buy down is when you pay a fee up front for a lower interest rate. So let's say the going interest rate was 7.25, and these are all fictitious numbers. Let's just say it's 7.25, and you can pay 1% of your loan, and your new interest rate would be 6.875. So for that, that's a permanent buy down. It means you paid a flat fee at closing. You can pay that yourself as the buyer. You can get credits from the seller to pay for it. Your lender can give you credit. Well, actually, your lender can't do a credit on a permanent buy down because it's a charge for the interest rate. But seller and buyer can both pay that. And then you have that end result of the lower interest rate for the life of the loan. So your payment is amortized over that 6.875 in this example. So for people who consider that option, it's math. We say, okay, well, if you spend X amount to lower your payment this amount, at which point in time will you recover the money you spent for the lower payment? That's ideal for people who are set it and forget it, moving into their forever home, don't want to think about things, right? Like they don't want to think about the market changing. They just want to make sure they're comfortable with something and get into it and call it a day. Now, on the flip side of that, we have the temporary buy down. So the temporary buy down this is what you're seeing all over right now. This has become the hot topic. I've put some information out there. I actually started talking about this months ago. Actually, there was a friend of mine, a colleague, his name is Brian Decker. He's out in California. You see him all over talking about his cryptocurrency and stuff. He's a very smart individual, energetic, but very smart. And, he started talking about the buy down, and we're not new to this. I'll tell you this up front. I've been using buy downs since back 15 years ago. This was big on developments. We used to use them all the time to give incentives, because really what it is it's a seller incentive, if you will, to try and help make the current environment more palatable, make it more affordable. Let's use terms. I should use terms that are relatable here, but making things cheaper in a way. So the temporary buy down is, you'll see the 2-1 buy down out there. And back in the day, we had the 3-2-1, and we had the 2-1, and we had the 1-1 is what we were looking at. But now you'll see more often the 2-1 buy down. In short, this is a temporary buy down the interest rate using that same scenario of 7.25. Let's say you have an interest rate, it's at 7.25%, and I use a 2-1 buy down. That means the very first year that my interest rate will be 2% lower. So it will be 5.25%, right? The next year, it adjusts to a 1% difference, hence the 2-1. And that 1 then now is 6.25%. And then in the third year, it goes back to the 7.25 that would have been on day one, right? So the end result on this is that someone who's borrowing $400,000, may realize a $350 to $400 lower payment that first year, and then $200 lower the next year, and then it adjusts to what they were looking at. One of the big differences between a temporary buy down and a permanent buy down, besides the fact that, well, it's in the name, one is temporary and the other one's permanent. The other is who can pay for it. A temporary buy down can only be paid by the seller or the lender. Now, you're going to be hard pressed to find a lender who can pay for a 2-1 buy down because the margins just aren't there, meaning there's not enough money to give back to pay for it. A 1-1 buy down, on the other hand, we're starting to see this. I'm starting to use this more because people want this. And essentially what that means is I'm able to give a credit back to pay for that. And now at 7.25, that means the first year they're going to be at 6.25, right? It's not the full 2%, it's a 1% drop in their interest rate. So now that individual has a 6.25 interest rate, and their payments based off that for the first year. And then again, going into that next year, it goes up to 7.25 for the life of that loan. However, in that example, it's important to note, if someone's at 7.25 and your lender is giving you a 1-1 buy down, they're most likely going to give you 7.5, and then you'll be at 6.5 the first year, adjusting to 7.5. And the reason being that the cost of that buy down is built into your interest rate. That's a margin. Now, I have a lot of people bringing these deals to me, and they're like, "Oh, it's an amazing deal. I got this." I'm not going to name the lenders who are putting it out there because they're, this is not about my competition or even about my company. But they'll say, "Listen, this company told me that they're going to give me that. My rate will be 1% lower the first year, and they're paying for it." And I tried I've tried, I've got to tell you, to explain to people that they're paying for it. I said, no, you're paying for it. You could get a better interest rate for the life of the loan. And I can do that for you, but here's how that works. The psychology of all this is where it comes into play. People want that $400 lower payment for that first year, right? Because a lot of people feel like interest rates are going to go lower. Interest rates are going to drop. I'm going to get a lower payment for the first year. I'll refinance. I'm ahead of the game. So it's a resource for people to try and maintain a lower payment during that time frame. You would ask about who would this be good for and whatnot.